previous dialogue, we heard from Secretary Granholm and Commissioner Simpson that the EU and the US are seizing the opportunity to align strategies and practical steps forward in managing the climate crisis. Proactive leadership and multilateral coordination will be essential in facing one of the greatest global challenges, one that transcends borders. The green transition will feature prominently as the European Union and the United States build a post-pandemic recovery agenda together. But there are many areas of cooperation to cover here at the forum. To highlight one such area that requires active engagement among allies and partners, I'll turn to Julia Friedlander, C. Boyden Gray Senior Fellow and Deputy Director of the Atlantic Council's Geoeconomic Center, to introduce our next distinguished guest. Over to you, Julia.
Hello, everyone. It is my pleasure today to welcome Senator Risch of Idaho to the EU Future Forum to talk about a very important piece of legislation that is working its way through the US Senate, the Strategic Competition Act. Senator, it's a pleasure to speak with you today. This is a wide-ranging bill covering US strategy and economics and politics and military. I was wondering if you might be able to highlight some of the high points of it and what you prioritized.
Sure. First of all, we ought to set the table and talk about how important this is. Look, China is the biggest foreign policy issue for the United States, for the European Union, and indeed for the planet. What's been happening with China in recent decades certainly indicates that they're moving very quickly to center stage on the world stage. And look, competition's good always, so long as it's fair and so long as the playing field is level. So that's why I've been working on this bill for some time. And certainly it hasn't been alone. It's been bipartisan. I've had a lot of help on it. When it came out of committee recently, it was on a 21-to-1 vote. So that tells you how broad the support is for this. The bill does five big things. It counters Chinese Communist Party political influence in the U.S., including, and importantly, universities. It established initiatives with allies and partners on tech, defense, and other issues. It allocates more funding to counter the Chinese infrastructure projects. It sanctions Chinese Communist Party officials for human rights abuses in Xinjiang, and it counters, very importantly, counters Chinese unfair trading practices like IP theft. They have used that to leverage their position in the world. They argue that they don't have the same experience and history we have with rule of law, with patents and international norms. I frankly don't buy that issue. We've got to get this part of it right, or it's going to be a very long 21st century for the world, really. And I'm hoping to move this as a standalone bill in the Senate, not attaching other bills to it, but we'll see. Probably going to move it forward before too long.
Thank you. And you mentioned that one of your key priorities there is countering the influence of the Chinese Communist Party. How do you think that that will go forward, especially within the US political framework, but also working with our close democratic allies?
Well, this is a bipartisan issue, and it's also a by-country issue. What the Communist Party does is they use money, threats, and intimidation and disinformation to undermine our open societies. Both the US and Europe have felt the impact of this. In 2019 and 2020, over 100 US universities accepted approximately $425 million in gifts from China. Well, these gifts aren't made because the Chinese feel warm and fuzzy about a particular university. They're meant to buy influence and to tamp down criticism of the way they work. We need to do more about this. This influence erodes free speech and debate. It compromises technology and innovation and coerces countries into accepting the Chinese Communist Party's line. US and Europe should be working together on this issue. That's the first chapter in a committee report I wrote last year on this. If anybody who hasn't gotten this, you can get it from the committee in the Senate. And it really is a comprehensive work that I did as chairman of the committee and on behalf of the committee. It talks about not just our universities, but also businesses, media, and even government, including state and local governments. So the Chinese Communist Party can't be allowed to do this. We must protect our democracy and build resiliency over the malign political influence from authoritarian actors.
And Senator, I was just about to ask you about the report that you flashed on the screen there. It's a wonderful piece, and I encourage everyone to take a look at it. It's very comprehensive. What are the next steps that the U.S. and Europe really need to take, particularly in the economic sphere, to counter what you say unfair economic trade practices, or increasingly supply chain issues, especially with regards to Xinjiang?
Well, the report that you just mentioned was focused on the United States relationship with Europe and the importance of us working together. Look, we have irritants between us, but overall, we are very much the same when it comes to our culture, our freedoms, our rule of law, our adherence to international norms. And it's important that we come together to do that. So we need to remember that if you put the U.S. together with Europe at a little over 300 million each, we still don't make up 1/2 of the population of China. Having said that, we have tremendous influence because of the decades and indeed centuries we have done the work building the rule of law and international norms, where we can all operate freely under a free market system and do it under the rule of law. But the first thing we need to do, of course, is try to get rid of these long-standing irritants, I call them, that we have, like the Boeing Airbus issue is a good start, and digital taxation, dueling privacy regulations. These are all important, but all of them pale in comparison to the influence that China is attempting to exert over the international stage. And we'll do a lot better cooperating rather than punishing each other for what are really small irritants compared to the overall issue that we have with China. If we leverage our combined markets, speak in a unified voice, we can push back against unfair economic practices, expand our trade and investment. The EU and several European countries are getting more involved in the Indo-Pacific and in Africa, and it's important that the US and Europe coordinate those on those continents, because we'll do a lot better together.
Couldn't agree more at the Atlantic Council, and certainly that is one of the main goals of the EU Future Forum. The Biden administration is quick out the gate with executive orders and with a stated goal of putting together a new strategic strategy on China. How do you assess its scorecard so far, right, just after the 100-day mark?
Well, I think the jury's still out. 100 days, everybody always jumps up and down about that, but it's an arbitrary number, and you like to see a whole lot of progress, but I think the jury is still out on that. First of all, we are on the same page on some things, like human rights in China. I'm pleased that the Biden team has sanctioned the Chinese officials over Hong Kong and Xinjiang. But look, we really need to work on the IP theft and the unfair trade practices. I mean, that is so important to all of us, to every country on the planet. China just does things differently than we do. They don't adhere to international norms. And my wife and I had the opportunity to travel in China in 1983. And when we left there, I said, well, this isn't going anywhere. My gosh, in just in a handful of decades, they have come centuries. They did it the old-fashioned way. They stole every good idea we have, except our freedoms, our democracy, and our economic system of a free market, free enterprise system, taking socialism as opposed to capitalism. And they have worked it to the point where they are moving very quickly, and we've got to push back against that. The administration's got to be careful when pushing cooperation with China. The Communist Party always tries to get us to sacrifice some of the freedoms that we have in exchange for cooperation and that sort of thing. So this has got to be done very carefully. I'm committed to work with the Biden administration with this. This is not a partisan issue in the United States any more than it is an issue between a difference of issue between the United States and Europe. We've got to work together.
Thank you. And as a key transatlantic voice, I'd just like to ask, what is your main message when you speak to parliamentary counterparts or with governments or in messaging to general public about transatlantic cooperation on China? What are the key elements there? Especially, I would say especially when some governments will say a confrontational approach to China may not be in our own national security interest.
Well, I think, first of all, first and foremost, we're stronger together than we are apart. And we've gotten used to doing things apart rather than together because we haven't really had the kind of challenge that China presents to us. As I said, we've argued over minuscule things when you're talking about in comparison to the challenge that we're getting from China. The United States and Europe, with some others involved, have built the kind of enterprise that we have in the world, and it's worked really, really well. It's built on free enterprise. It's built on a free market system. It's built on democracies. And the Chinese aren't used to doing this sort of thing. They're putting one foot in front of the other, following the kind of things, the way they do business in a strong authoritarian country that is not dependent upon a robust, free, democratic population that can bring the kind of influence that's needed when we're talking about this sort of thing. So my main message is we're stronger together. Not only are we stronger together, we need to focus on the fact that we're very much the same when it comes to human rights, when it comes to the international norms. And we don't recognize this sometimes, and it's important that we join together as we go through this 21st century and bring China along, requiring them to engage in the kind of international norms that we have used to build the free market structure that is the world today.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and we couldn't agree more here, specifically on the like-minded shared values and also shared capabilities in a lot of ways. But you highlight we have to get beyond some of the immediate hurdles in the transatlantic relationship, Boeing, Airbus being one of them. We're very happy to see that that's at least on pause through July. But the EU is a complicated beast, and I think we highlight this, right? There are differences of opinion within the Commission, between the Commission and the Parliament, but also among member states. So, it's complicated for us Americans sometimes to speak to Europe. How do you think we can, try to develop consensus more effectively given those differences?
Well, I serve in the United States Congress. I know about differences and differences from state to state, from party to party, from individual to individual. I think what we always have to come back to is that we're a lot more the same than we are different. And we need to prioritize what we want to do and prioritize big problems versus squabbles. And look, people that are free people have a tendency to squabble. Nobody ever said it was pretty, or nobody ever said it was fun to do. But these have got to get resolved. And I think that things like this COVID-19 issue that we've all experienced have brought the U.S. and Europe closer together, particularly as the Chinese have pushed back, refusing to take any responsibility for this. In fact, even attempting to foist off responsibility on the West, which we all know it's ludicrous. We've set up dialogues on China and taken action on it. We need to continue to do that, and we've got to sustain. We can't. This isn't a thing where you just run out and do something and say, "There, it's fixed." No, it isn't fixed. This is going to be a long-term issue over the over the rest of the 21st century and beyond, probably. And we need to get a a protocol in place for how we work together to push back on what's a very big market and a market that wants to do business different than what we've been doing business really for centuries.
Thank you so much. And Senator Risch, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today, for taking part on the EU Future Forum as a transatlanticist. We thank you all the more, and we look forward to seeing your leadership in the coming years and on this issue. So thanks again. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you very much. And I meet with our European friends regularly in Washington, D.C., whether it's ambassadors, whether it's ministers, and we talk about this issue all the time. We're going to continue to do that. This is our relationship with Europe is good. I know our European friends sometimes wring their hands about it because people here make statements that in a free society anybody can make. But look, we are much, much closer to our European cousins than we are anyone else in the world. We need to make this work. It'll do good things for both of us.
Thank you so much.